Hey, I'm Alex Southey, and you are listening to my coffee, but also your worst song. Uh, this was a pretty fun one. I thought there was a lot of good trivia, sort of said, lots of good stories. And it's with Dave Bidini. He is in Canadian band Rheostatics. Biggest peak was probably 80s, 90s, had great big albums like Whale Music and Melville 1991, and then kind of had a second life, second career in doing the West End Phoenix, which is a publication based in Toronto's West End. The talk begins with West End Phoenix stuff. As if that's not your thing, that's cool. It's somewhat niche, but I thought it was really an interesting start to the chat. And then we get into rheostatic stuff, more of what you'd expect from this podcast. Great stories, a lot of sort of, you might say, sort of Canadian trivia fun things to learn, and name drops and things like that. Not that he's name droppy, but there were names dropped, and that just helps me get those eyeballs and ears on the podcast. So anyway, great episode, great talk. Thank you all for listening. I'm Alex Southey, and this is your worst song. What is the area that you really focus on for the West End Phoenix?
I mean, yeah, like we always say that it's kind of it's a perforated edge. It's a dotted line, our boundaries, because we have, written about stuff that happens in North York. We've definitely done Mimico,
Sure.
Etobicoke, Mississauga. We did a whole East End Phoenix. Occasionally, we'll report on an East End story. But vaguely, like the boundaries are Humber River to Spadina, vaguely, and then like the lake to St. Clair. But we've written about
Okay.
Eglinton and stuff before, so it's kind of more, we're with the West End Phoenix, like we're out of the West End. We publish out of the West End, but certainly some of our stories are literally, outside our office door at Bloor and Dufferin. But like, a good story is a good story, and we do have readers all over the city too. So we're not really, like if you read the paper, you'll for sure recognize and identify some of the signposts in the writing as being supremely West End, locally West End, but also there are stories with kind of a more broad universal view, definitely.
Sure. And also, it makes sense for you to do that, not just so that it's not so niche, although there's something cool about being that niche, but it makes sense because, like you said, you have readers in other part of the cities. Like, they may not live in the West End, but they still will find what's happening there relevant potentially to them.
I
So,
mean, yeah, we also like we'll mail 700 copies of the paper across Canada too, and around Ontario. So there are people that subscribe and read the paper that aren't even close to the city, let alone the West End. So
that
we
must
have to
feel
kind
good.
yeah,
That's like evidence of the quality of the writing and coverage. And
I think so. Oh, it's great. Listen, it's really neat when we sit down and we have our delivery days, and we the volunteers will come. The volunteer delivery force will come and get their papers and deliver them to the neighborhoods. But we also spend a lot of time just like, stuffing envelopes with papers and sending them out to, every corner of the country, which is really fun. Yeah, to know that it's reaching beyond, where we're centered and into the vastness of the country and all these interesting places and cool provinces.
well, that's what I was gonna ask, not to put you on the spot too much, but has there been a place recently, even let's say, that jumps out at you like, whoa, somebody's interested in this part of Canada?
I mean, I'd have to probably go back and
Okay.
think. No, no, but we deliver to we mail to Iqaluit
Wow.
and Newfoundland and Dawson City and northern BC and the middle of Saskatchewan, and yeah, that's always really really neat when that when those addresses come across for
Yeah.
sure.
Those postal codes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Well, I'm sure you've talked about it, other places, but I would like to know what inspired you to start West End Phoenix. Like, was it just I want to document what's happening in the small part of the city, and I have a writing background as well as music, which obviously we'll get into, but you had a writing background, so why not do that?
Yeah, yeah, I did. Listen, I was writing for high school newspapers
Hmm.
when I was growing up, and wrote for fanzines and music publications throughout that time. But also, yeah, I had a column in the Toronto Star for a couple of years, and I had a column in the National Post. But what really kind of sparked it for me was I wrote a book about Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. I worked for the Yellowknife newspaper,
Hmm.
and that just seeing how they operated, what the connection to the city was between that and the paper, how it was still a really important, dynamic, vital print media entity in a capital city in Canada made me think, made me wonder what that would look like at home. And then,
Mm.
when I came back to the West End from that time up north, I looked around and realized that most of the community newspapers in the West End had been bought by Metroland and had been but like gutted of all content. Basically, they became kind of glorified flyers. There was
Yes.
that, and then there was a lot of free media. The Metro chain was happening, and it seemed to me that there was kind of a place. And this was also a time when everybody was running to blogs and websites and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. So it
Hmm.
seemed to me there was just kind of a, there was a spot within the media landscape to do something creatively with community news to almost kind of reinvent it. Like, in the paper, we sort of, we do like include a couple of real standard traditional features when it
Yeah.
comes to community news. Like we do a pet of the month and we do a crossword. But our sort of spin on that is, our crossword is written by Paul Vermeer, who's one of Canada's greatest poets.
Hmm.
And our pet of the month for many years was written by Heidi Sapinka, the novelist. So we were able to kind of take these kind of traditional features within community news and just kind of spin them a little bit. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's fantastic. What a great way to go about doing that. If I may just super quickly
mhm.
interrupt where the story is, although your answer, thank you very much for your answer. It's great. I want to hear a little bit more about Yellowknife. Like, what was that like? You didn't grow up in Yellowknife, did you?
No,
So, yeah, what was that like?
well, yeah, I had gone up there for a literary festival like a year before, a few years before, and it was the Northwest Territories were that was the only part of Canada I'd never toured in
Hmm.
before or
Hmm.
visited. And when I was up there, I was like, oh my God, there's this whole other region and this whole other city that I was completely new to me. And I thought that was a real gift
Hmm.
after, like 30, 40 years of touring. There was still this speaks to just Canada's vastness, but there was
Definitely.
still, a place, a region in Canada that was undiscovered, right? And the interesting thing about excuse me about Yellowknife is
It's all
that
good.
it is a very open city in the sense that Dene culture is just like a very very visible part of the community, and in terms of writing about First Nations and writing about Dene Nation,
Hmm.
I'd worried a little bit about how do I how does that culture become obvious to me, and it was and the answer was talk to that guy or talk to that woman, like
Right.
people were everywhere. So like Whitehorse is very different in that indigenous life is pushed outside to the margins a little bit. When Whitehorse is kind of BC North, but Yellowknife is truly a profoundly Dene foothold.
Hmm.
100% of the territorial government is Dene. So it
Wow.
was like wandering into this whole other world, and I I'm the story that I told in the book was a reporter that befriended me, this fellow John McFadden, who was the crime reporter for the Yellowknifer. He was arrested while I was up there for by the RCMP for obstructing a police investigation.
Okay.
And so, kind of the back third of the book is kind of a court procedural in a way. I follow his trial, and the narrative that
Hmm.
emerged for me was, it was the cops versus the newspaper, and the stakes were the town, basically. So you follow as a reader, you follow through John's ordeal and having to win his court case to not be sent to jail. And if one of the Yellowknife reporters had been seen to be breaking the law, then it threw their whole existence in peril. So yeah, that was my experience there.
Wow.
It was amazing. I'm so glad I got a chance to experience it.
Yeah, and sorry, may I ask how old you were at the time?
Me,
Yes.
um, this is, I guess, I don't know. This is like, it's about 10 years ago, so it would have been 51.
Okay, okay. So I
I,
think that's so interesting that you've just had everything you've just described to me would be enough also for an interview and for somebody's career. But you've had this whole other career that I'm finding the right avenue exit from this to get into that. But do you ever stop and think about that?
sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit. Like, no, listen, for me, it was like, shit, like from the first time we were playing shows, you know, um, early 80s, and I was also writing too. So I was writing for like Shades and the Village Voice and Op and a bunch of other music magazines. Like from as soon as I kind of got my creative legs, I've just been like sort of sprinting the whole time. So,
But
but
it
that
sounds like you got your creative legs early,
yeah, I
which I
did.
think is amazing because not everybody has that.
Well, and that was like that was also coming out of a time in art, and certainly art in Canada. I mean, big A art, so including
Hmm.
all the disciplines. When, especially through punk, where it was like, fuck, you don't have to go to school to do this. You don't, you can just you can. It was the beginning of the DIY movement, right? You
Yeah,
can
that's
just
exactly
do
what
it,
I was about to say.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
people were starting bands, people were starting fanzines, people were starting radio stations, all of that. And so that was, it was not like I would have, if I had grown up in the 50s, maybe it was different because things would have been really, really, a lot
Yep.
tighter.
Yep.
And every decade there are different pursuits in
Yep.
terms of young people doing stuff. So, but that was the perfectly like new kind of free time. So I was able to, to do all of these things and not be worried about what the consequences were or what that career path was, just sort of doing it, right? So, and
Ye-
also listen, also a lot of really good like mentors and just, like older people who'd done that sort of thing that were really encouraging to the band, encouraging to me too. So that helped a lot, and supportive parents and all that stuff as well.
who just quickly, who jumps out as mentors from the older guard when you were
Yeah,
coming up?
yeah, I had a teacher's assistant at York University, John Doyle. He was the TV critic for the Globe and Mail eventually,
Mm,
but back
mm.
then he was a TA, but he was Irish from Dublin, and just super encouraging. I went to Trinity College in 1985 in Dublin. I went there because
Really?
he sort of said, "You have to go. You can stay with my parents. You should go and enroll in a summer class." And so I did that, and so he really helped. There was also a guy named Ron Gaskin who he's passed away now, but he was in the 60s. Actually, he started his own high school in the 1960s. He wasn't a hippie and he wasn't an activist, but he just kind of got shit done and could kind of
Okay.
communicate with everybody in every corner. Anyways, we had played the Cabana Room, this old club at King and Spadina upstairs, and we got a phone call. I remember we were rehearsing in my parents' basement, and the phone rang, and it was this guy on the other end of the line, this guy, Ron Gaskin. He'd also managed a few bands in Toronto that we really liked,
Hmm.
like older bands. And he was like, I just wanted to tell you guys, like, I saw you guys play at the Cabana Room, and I think you're great, and you have a chance to have a career, so just keep going. So it was like things like people like that. I also my old editor at Shades, which was it was a broadsheet tabloid,
Hmm.
a music paper in Toronto, Sheila Wawanosh. She was also fuck man, like I wrote for them when I was like 15, 16 years old, and she was very kind in terms of the way she edited, and she was also, really encouraging. And I think you need people like that to tell you that you don't suck, and give you a bit of support. And so all of that really helped. And even all of like the musical heroes that I've met and kind of continue to meet, frankly,
Hmm.
like I remember like the Ramones, like those guys were
Oh,
always really
wow.
good to me, and Stompin' Tom was always great, and the
Wow.
guys from Rush. So all of these idols of mine that I've met have always been super friendly and gentle and good. So that helps a
Yeah.
lot too.
Yeah, when you say the word mentor, especially for all three of the people that you just listed, but especially the first teacher who suggested that you stay with his family in Dublin and go to Trinity. I've had the opportunity to, I didn't go there, but I visited the camp grounds and everything. It's amazing. I love Dublin. Irish people are the best. Um, but just the fact that you had somebody that's what a mentor is. A mentor isn't just somebody who nudges you in the right direction. It's somebody who really like takes you under their wing, and it sounds like they did that. So I think it's that amazing that you had that, and that these people were all just willing to like give a kid a chance that they saw some talent in. Not
Yeah.
everybody is so. You wish everybody would have those
Right.
people, but they don't. So I think that's amazing, and it's no wonder that you were swept up on the creative breeze and you just
Well,
sort of went where they went.
you also like, all that stuff gets passed along as well. Like
Hmm.
just two kind of instances. One would have been this band called the Local Rabbits from Montreal that we went to a radio station, a campus radio station in Montreal, and we were promoting our second album, which was Melville 1991.
Hmm.
And they came to the radio station to meet us with their CDs and to get them signed.
Hmm.
And so we signed them and we started talking to them and we said, "What's going on?" And they were like, "Oh, we're in a band and, you know, we play a couple of your songs." And it was like, we were playing Club Soda that night in Montreal and we were like, "Do you want to come down to the club and we'll play our set, and then when we come back for an encore, you guys show up and you play a song from our first album." And they were like, and so they said they would. They were so thrilled,
Hmm.
and I didn't know this, but they all came out dressed like versions of us. And so so that was like, just that was an instance of like, oh, people were good to us. And then I remember the band the Inbreds. We
Hmm.
wrote them, like I remember I wrote them like three postcards about just inviting them to come to Toronto to record in one of our studios. And but I sent the postcards like a week apart. So they didn't really know what the postcard was leading towards until that. Anyways, so it was
Wow.
really super fun to do that kind of stuff and to just kind of pass it on, right?
No, it's great that you do that. I think that is how it has to go. And also it feels good passing it on and knowing that you're now in that upper position and not in that receiving position. It's Yeah, it's a rewarding feeling. I want to go back to one thing that you said. I'm curious. I just want to check. When you said that you listed a few places that you wrote for, but one of them was the Village Voice. Are you
Yeah.
talking about like the New York-based
Yeah.
fame?
Yeah.
Whoa. So how did that come about?
That was I loved it. Like, well, it I mean, I actually, it's kind of it's always been our template a little bit for West End Phoenix, partly because um, you know, I did I I didn't live in New York. I didn't live in the
Hmm.
West Village, but I loved reading that paper
It's
because,
iconic.
yeah, and the writing was so good. So we kind of like,
Yes.
at West End Phoenix, we were like, um, if our writing could be up to a certain standard and can be creative, it should be good enough that you can read no matter you read it and enjoy it no matter where you live. So that was kind of the template. But me and Dave Bookman, the late broadcaster, we and musician, we his face is on a plaque outside the Horseshoe because he ran new music nights on
Oh,
Tuesday for decades.
then
But
I've seen his face many times.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Dave and I did a radio show called High and Outside at CIUT back in the late '80s, and I remember like we just used to Dave actually had a copy of the Village Voice, and I picked it up. And there used to be a sports section at the back,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a headline for a story about the New York Rangers called um, "Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid." And I started reading it, and it was unlike any kind of sports writing I'd ever read before.
Huh.
And so the editor of that section and the person who wrote that story was a fellow named Jeff Zed Klein. And we just called him up and asked him if he wanted to appear on, like, be a guest on our radio show.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said sure, and so we had him on for a couple times as a guest, and I just chanced to kind of send him some writing for that I'd done for this Toronto paper called Metropolis,
Mm-hmm.
which was the precursor to I magazine, which was
Oh,
kind of
okay.
the rival to Now. Anyways, yeah, sent him some writing, and he was like, "I had no idea you were a writer. I just thought you were a guy on the radio. Blah blah blah. You and Dave." So he said, like, "Would you ever be interested in working for us?" So yeah, so I did a bunch of stuff for them, and that was, oh my God, like I remember I wrote a quite a long story about Ben Johnson, the Canadian sprinter,
Mm-hmm.
who was found to have taken anabolic steroids, blah 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 blah, ran 9.79 in Seoul and had the gold medal stripped from him. Anyways, there wrote a story about him, and yeah, that was one of the great moments. Like, going down to Lightman's on Yonge, which is where you could buy the Village Voice, and
Mm-hmm.
opening it and like reading my writing in that in a paper that I fucking cherished. Like,
Exactly. I was
oh
gonna
my
say,
God.
even just not just as a creative guy, but specifically as a music guy, you must
Hmm.
have understood the uh
Yeah,
have magnitude of that is what I'm trying to say, I
of
guess. And
course.
seeing your name in the byline must have been as
Totally.
cool in a different way as seeing your band name on the marquee or something the first
Yeah,
time, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, okay, it might be time to get into it then.
Okay.
So, talking about, in this case, I'm going to frame things through the rheostatics. Obviously that started when you guys were in university, is that correct?
Um, no, high school.
Oh, high scholl. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, I knew it was at school.
that's
So,
okay.
explain to me how that comes together. Again, I'm sure this is well-tread ground, but yeah.
No, not at all. I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, I would have. Tim Vesley,
Mm-hmm.
our bass player,
Mm-hmm.
but he's so much more than that. He does everything in the band. Anyways, you know, I kind of hacked around in basements when I was like, 13, 14,
Mm-hmm.
15 with friends playing in, doing like Rush and Triumph and Joe Walsh covers and Heart covers and playing them fucking so, whatever. You're terrible at that age, but who cares? So you're having fun. And then just sort of um uh noticing that Tim was playing bass in the concert band at school.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple classes together, and it was like bass, just sort of, do you want to jam? And so we did. And then we had a drummer that didn't work out, so he recommended Dave Clark, who's our drummer, was our first drummer, and is now back in the band. But
Mm-hmm.
the three of us, we also had a friend who was a keyboard player, a synth player, and we made a demo tape. Like, our parents paid for it. We went out to Brampton. We made this 3-song demo tape. I sent it to Gary Top,
Mm-hmm.
who ran the Edge
Oh,
um,
okay. Yeah.
in Toronto, and there's a beautiful book that just came out about Gary's life.
Hmm.
And he was so important to everybody. The amazing thing about the Edge was the fact that any you could be any age and go to that club, um, because they served food. It was a special license that they
Oh,
had. Like, adults could drink, but kids could eat and not get served, and that was fine
right.
because it
Wow.
meant you could go to this like 70-seat club downtown and see Echo and the Bunnymen and Jonathan Richman and Para
Wow.
Uru and Lydia Lunch and on and on and on. Incredible. The Police, XTC, Talking
Yeah.
Heads. And in that time, in the early 80s, late 70s. And I sent a demo tape to Gary Top, mailed it, sent it to him, heard nothing. And then I was writing a review of I was going to a screening of Let There Be Rock by AC/DC.
Okay.
Yeah, at the
Yeah.
New Yorker on Young, and between screenings, the other feature was Union City Blues, which starred Debbie Harry from
Mm.
Blondie. And I was just sitting there at the table, and Gary Top walked in and came over and sat at my table and asked if I was Dave from the Rheostatics. And
Whoa.
it turned out he had called my home because I put my number on the cassette, called my home, talked to my mom, and my mom had said, Dave is on Young Street at the New Yorker Theater going to these movies. 'Cause I was writing about it for this high school newspaper. And so Gary came and found me and said, I want to book your band. How's Tuesday in October? And so that was our first show. And then, you survive that show, right? You
Hmm.
fucking like, it's like you're like running from a wild animal, you're like, your nerves, it's
Your
insane.
whole
So
body's just jello.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
totally, totally. So you survive that, and then a bunch of shows after that. We did three-piece horn section for a while, and then Martin Tielli knew Dave Clark knew him from the neighborhood. He went to an alternative high school that we didn't
Hmm.
really, know that well and stuff. Anyway, he came into our lives, and that sort of cemented our lineup. Decided to make a record, and then decided to go on tour. And really, our first tour was '87. So after that, we were just kind of, yeah, swept into it.
But so thank you. That's all great. That leaves me with many questions, which is a
Okay.
good thing. The first question I want to get to, and I've talked about this with other people who started early in bands or playing solo or whatever, and I would say early is what you guys were.
Yeah.
Do you do you remember it occurring to you to even be self-conscious when you were starting the band, or were you just so in the bliss of youth and confidence that comes with that you guys were just like, yeah, you play this, I play this, let's write songs. It was just this rolling wheel that didn't even leave you time to consider that because I take myself for example, I know other people where we came to music late because we just didn't have the outward confidence to express artistic ideas. That seems mortifying. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you remember feeling confident?
Um, I mean, yeah, because I had done like, I remember I played this high school with this, just scrappy cover band friends that I'd played with before then. And that was just like, so that, yeah. And then, and just feeling pretty good. Like I was super nervous and self-conscious and lacking all confidence until, we actually got on stage.
Uh-huh.
And like it just felt natural to me. So yeah, I think there were all of those moments of self-consciousness. And then when we formed the Rios, um, yeah, it we were there. There was no careerism about it, right? We had no standards for ourselves, right? Like no, we weren't worried about how we were going to be perceived.
Okay.
Again, like that was a big part of, like I would have felt more self-conscious like going out on a Friday night on a date or something, but
Yeah.
I certainly didn't feel it with art,
Okay.
because again, I think the climate of the times was, it was the first time in kind of, music, um, uh, in popular music, really, where there were trans performers, there were LGBTQ performers, there were
Hmm.
performers like in Toronto, especially, like there was like a huge reggae scene. There was a huge funk scene. So, you'd be sharing bills with people from all around the city who didn't look like you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that helps
Sure.
with that, battle of self-consciousness, right?
Hmm.
Like when everybody's different together, I guess.
Yes. That
So
makes
you don't
sense.
have to worry that self-consciousness, you don't have to worry about fitting in because nobody fits in.
Exactly. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And what did writing songs as the band look like? Rheostatics in this case. Like, what is that? What does it look like? What I maybe it's different now. What did it look like then?
You mean how we wrote them, or?
Yeah, I mean, literally, some people will have a primary songwriter or two, and then they bring it to the full band, and then everybody fleshes out. Other people jam it together, like literally jam a song out of
Right.
jamming, right? So I'm curious which you guys did.
Hard to know, real hard for me to think really back to that
Okay.
time, because then, well, that was just like so new and so, and that was a long time ago. But, I could speak kind of more accurately to, like, Rheostatics kind of classic lineup
Yeah, sure.
times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also just how that kind of has changed, frankly.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
was going to get to. So yeah, that would be great. Yeah, how was it and how
yeah.
is it?
Well, I guess in the very beginning, me and Tim would have, like, just, yeah, jammed stuff out,
Hmm.
and then somebody would have written lyrics, and there were, both of us sang. But
Yeah.
when we got Martin in the band, we were all, it was neat, like we were all writing and all singing and all creating, not only on our songs but on each other's songs.
Hmm.
And you know yes, because sometimes I met bands, and the rhythm guitar player, played his rhythm parts, or the bass player would play the part that was suggested by the lead singer, and blah, 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 blah. There was nothing like that. Like, nobody told anybody else what to play.
Okay.
We all just kind of, trusted that somebody would come up with, gold in terms of, it's funny. It was like, eventually, sometimes people would bring in home recordings of their, 4 track of their songs, and
Yeah.
we wouldn't even listen to them. We would just, they'd show us the song in rehearsal, and we would just play and kind of invent and create
Sure.
it. Some people like to actually have a framework and a
Yeah.
roadmap, but not so much with us. And the neat thing I always found, and this is still true today, where you'll come in with an idea of how a song's supposed to go, and
Mm.
then the drummer will just lay a groove or a beat or an idea on top of it, which you hadn't even considered.
And
And
totally changes the context or
yeah,
subgenre even sometimes.
there's like Mountains in the Sea, which is the last song on Here Come the Wolves. Our last record was,
Hmm.
it was kind of like a more of sort of a, like a Neil Young dirge when I had it, just written on my own. And then I brought it in, and Dave Clark, our drummer, kind of played like a rumba pattern over it. And I was like, fuck, what's going on here? But it's great. It ended up turning out fabulously, and gave it a completely different spin. So, and we had discussions about that too. I was like, I don't know, Dave. He was like, no, no, this is cool. And the other guys really liked it too. So it was like, okay, everybody else likes it. Let's kind of do it. So
Sure, sure.
yeah.
That makes sense. I'm wondering. It sounds like you all have a great relationship, especially when it comes to songwriting, and you are open to everybody's ideas and all that stuff, which is awesome. But even the greatest musicians ever will come once in a while have a bad idea. So
Yep.
do you just not say anything when it's a bad idea and hope that it's sort of phased out by virtue of just the direction of the song and the progression of the writing? Or will you just, or you do have the good relationship and therefore you can just go, you know what, man, I don't know if that's working. Like it's totally up to you to create something else, but this thing, I don't know.
You know, um, if we'd rehearsed a song in the rehearsal space that was, we weren't sure about, we would
Hmm.
always play it live. And
Mm,
then that's the true test, right? and
yeah.
and the songwriter or the musician will know if people are responding to it, and if people aren't responding to it, we just wouldn't do it again. Right. So the song was allowed to kind of live and die on its own terms a bit.
Yep.
And if the audience didn't seem really too keyed in on it or interested or excited by it, then we wouldn't pursue it.
No,
Because,
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
we also had like, because there was 3/4 songwriters in the band, we have
Right.
fucking millions of songs.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh my God, here's the song I spent 4 months working on. It was like,
Yes.
okay, that doesn't work. I got another one, right? So
Yeah, no, no, that's
yeah.
that's that's fantastic. I think that's rare that there are so many people. It's not rare that there are a bunch of members contributing, but it's rare how much it seems like was evenly contributed, and everybody's writing full stuff, but then
Well,
being a side help on other people's stuff, you know?
it was great for me too, because it took me a while to just feel confident in my singing, a lot
Hmm.
longer than the other two main vocalists. So it was great. I have a bunch of songs that I didn't really think were right for me, or I couldn't really manage the melody or whatever. And it was great. I would just write them and have the other guys sing them.
Right, right.
And that was so beautiful to sort of see something that you'd created taken, taken by somebody else and interpreted by them and, lending their heart and soul to it. And, yeah, we kind of got away from that a little bit,
Yeah.
and then did come back to it. And now the music we're doing is completely non-lyrical. So, yeah, that was great to have. That's why you're in a band. Like
Yeah.
everybody makes everybody else stronger, or should.
Should, yeah, if it's a good band, if it's
Exactly.
a that'll stand the test of time. Well, I'm going to begin the official questioning, the four
Okay.
questions that I referenced. So the first one I usually ask is, and it's related a little bit to what we were talking about, what is your best gig memory with the Rheostatics? And that can mean anything.
Yeah.
It can be the time you nailed it musically, or it can just be like a vibe thing.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many, really. Thankfully.
Yeah.
Um. We're going to Vancouver in 1987. Like that's just like such an impossible journey, and
Hmm.
fucking my dad gave us his car and we towed a U-Haul behind us, and then the timing chain broke in the mountains of BC, and you had to figure out a way to get to Vancouver, and then not only that, we had to figure out a way how to get back from Vancouver. So
Good Lord.
a series of vehicles, but it's an incredible journey. So glad I did it. It really helped shape my sensibility as a Canadian, as just like a person and an
Hmm.
artist.
Hmm.
But I remember we went out there and we played like the Railway Tavern, and we played the Savoy, and we played great. All of our shows out there were incredibly triumphant for whatever reason. And like you're going
Hmm.
across the country and you don't know what to expect. And all these people have kind of heard of you because of CBC.
Right.
And there's just like this whole incredible music community that I think responded to us even more quickly and with more,
Fervor.
enthusiasm and fervor than Torontonians did. So that was really great. Also, and I've written a little bit about this in my first book, On a Cold Road, but also our first gig in New York too at Kenny's Castaways. It was like a showcase gig at the New Music Seminar, and the whole crowd was just like, it was silly with laminates, people wearing laminates from record companies, and it was amazing. And then having to we were so nervous for that, and going down on the bus with four other bands, and being kind of
Yep.
competitive too, and then anyway surviving that and being really good. I think that night was great, and that was a little bit too like I felt like I was in the Olympics because it was a
Yeah.
Canadian band in front of an American crowd, right? So that's kind of
Definitely.
cool. That was kind of cool. And then I think another example would be more recent, and that's at Massey Hall. I
Mm.
remember talking to Ray McGuire from Trooper
Hmm.
for my book, and him saying that he had gone out, he walked out to Pacific Coliseum the first time Trooper played their hometown rink, and he said I would go up to the mic and I would say, "Oh, how y'all feeling tonight? Let's rock and roll," or whatever. And he said, um, instead, this particular show he played, he just he went up to the mic and then he pulled himself back and he just listened to the crowd.
Oh,
And so I did that when we played Massey Hall. We were doing one of our songs, "Fan Letter to Michael Jackson," and it's a song. It's kind of a bolero. It builds and builds and builds and builds and builds at the end, and till it crests, and then it
hmm.
ends. And I just waited and I listened to the crowd responding, coming back. I'll never forget it, right? And it was like a million birds, songbirds in the sky
Yeah.
converging as one, like the whistling and the enthusiasm and the cheering. It was beautiful. So yeah, I mean that just kind of is a bit of a just a like that's a real treasured sort of memory in terms
Yeah.
um of a high, one of the highs for sure.
And I like that the memories stretch the career of the band too,
Yeah.
as well. one thing quickly about New York. So you said that was your first time playing New York,
Yeah.
but was your first time in New York as well?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So what was that like? Because I feel like even for me, anybody who pays any attention to music or pop culture history in general in North America, like New York and
Of
LA
course.
are
Yeah.
such those things. So they have this reputation even before you go. And I found when I went, I was like, this city actually feels like it looks in the movies. This is actually what it's like. And what did you think?
Yeah. I mean, that was interesting too, because it was a new music seminar. So there was, like, I remember using the phone to call my girlfriend in the lobby of the hotel, and then
hmm
beside me talking on the phone was Africa Bambaataa, and
Oh, I don't actually recognize that name. I'm sorry. Who is
oh yeah,
that?
that's okay. Like an early hip hop like
Oh,
giant,
okay.
pioneer, like really important early guy.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyways, he was so, and I remember like BB King's band was leaving as we were arriving, and these like 15 guys in beautiful suits were carrying their cases. Anyways, it was just so like
Wow.
it was an elevated atmosphere environment for
Yeah.
music for sure. So uh yeah, so you felt the intensity and the importance
Right.
of the thing, right? And yeah, like I said, like it was because it was a festival, like bands were, jockeying for,
Yeah.
record to get signed and stuff too.
Yeah.
But a story I tell on a cold road was um this young beautiful Brazilian woman, was a girl, I guess, at the time. She was like, she was at the show and blah blah blah. She was talking to me after, and then we got on the tour bus after, and I noticed she was kind of hanging out around the bus. And I have a girlfriend back home, whatever, and we've never been a band like that would,
Uh,
pursue women, girls. After, it was
yeah.
just never part of our reality. We'd be more than happy just going back to the hotel room, having a beer and playing cards, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was just the thing. But anyways, she was like, so I went down off the bus and I sort of talked to her, and she was like, "You want to go for a walk?" And I was like, "Okay." And we just, because it's funny, like we had this incredibly triumphant night. We felt so good about ourselves. So I followed her and I went on this nocturnal journey with her, like through the streets of New York, until we ended up in front of this bodega. She handed this guy who was sitting on the steps of the bodega some money. He handed back to her this chunk of hash. And I'll never forget, she lifted up her dress and she put it in her panties.
Oh my God. What?
So, and like, that was enough for me. That was like, okay. And then, we went back to the bus, and then she left and we were
Gee,
back on the bus. It was like, but it was such a thrilling, like, here I am in New York. Like that
that's a New
gig
York
happened,
story.
and then this happened, right?
Yeah.
It was like, so
Wow.
yeah. So New York produced this amazing, like, nocturnal odyssey with this, yeah, Brazilian girl
Wow.
of the
Yeah.
night.
What a
Yeah.
story. No wonder you haven't forgotten that. Yeah.
It was awesome.
Something I like to ask just as a bit of trivia.
Yeah.
It's silly, but whatever. And then I'll get back to the questions. What's a green room that sticks out in your memory? Like it
There,
doesn't
it's,
have to be the nicest. It could just be like, oh, there was this weird thing that's I've never had in a green room before, or like a rocking horse, or I don't
I
know. I'm
mean,
just whatever.
oh, well, I think about the Tragically Hip shows opening for
hmm
them, because I remember, like, the green room that wasn't super green was the Le Colisée in Quebec, and I remember that mostly because like the food was all like homemade, kind of like it was,
Oh, whoa.
all the other shows have been kind of properly catered, and in
Yeah.
some instances, like in Ottawa, the Corel Center, whatever it's Canadian Tire Center, I think it's called now, it was all like catered in house because they have in house catering in that new multi-use
Yeah.
arena. But in
Sure.
Quebec, it was still, you know, people's grannies bringing in beef bourguignon and tourtière. It was amazing. So
Wow.
I kind of
Yeah.
think of that backstage as being particularly charming.
That's pretty cool. What were there any on the shows that you did do with the Tragically Hip? Was there anything of note in terms of like I guess I'm trying to think of. I mean this. I want like a positive gotcha, not a negative gotcha. You know what I want? Like, oh yeah, they always tragically up always brought along. I can't even think of it. You know, they always had. You know, uh, is there anything that stuck out from touring with them? I guess it's a better, more general question. Jesus Christ.
Oh well, so many things really.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Or any shows, any specific shows, or
Yeah, I
uh,
mean, yeah, sure. Like in Newfoundland, we played in the Memorial
mhm.
Gardens with us and Eric's Trip, I think was the bill. And yeah, we walked out on stage and it was this packed hockey arena, and we were the opening band, and there were already like, people on each other's shoulders, and the crowd was like roaring, like so into it. That was great. We got to play Maple Leaf Gardens, our hometown rink, which was
Yeah.
amazing too. And yeah, it was good. It was like you understand a kind of the loneliness of that kind of
Life.
little bit,
Yeah.
like the big, 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 big stage in the big room. And I think the first time we played, we had set up so far apart from each other, and then
Mm.
realized, oh, we don't have to do that. So we kind of set up like almost like our club stage.
Haha.
We were close to each other, which made it a lot better.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, yeah. But it was great being around those guys. Gord was always so great and supportive and lovely. We did at Cobo Hall in Detroit. That's the album that the Hip used for their Live Between Us live record.
Buddy,
We
I was gonna ask you about that because I that was one of the few CDs my dad had
Nice.
was specifically that record, and they shout you out at the very
Yeah.
beginning of it. And yeah, I was gonna ask about that, but
Well, yeah, that you get, I think we had like 38 minutes for our opening set, and that before that show, Tim went for a walk and ended up at the Maritime Sailors Museum,
hmm
which is honors all of the people lost on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
hmm
And we recorded Wreck the Edmund Fitzgerald for Melville. And then so that night, and it's a hard song to sing, there's so many fucking verses. Tim said, Tim said, why don't we play Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald as part of our set? And so we used like what 11 minutes of our
Yeah,
38 minute
wow.
set to do that song. But we got a standing ovation after we played it. And then Gord came out and said that. And I think he was particularly moved because we did that. And we did a really good version too.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's another amazing memory of being with those guys.
What are the chances that opening set of yours was ever recorded?
Oh, yeah, that's all. We have all that stuff. Yep.
Okay, you do. Okay, okay.
But we
Yeah,
didn't, yeah, we didn't, when we did our live record, Double Live, we didn't include that
that. Okay.
version. We included a version of Requiem Fitzgerald that we did in Thunder Bay. So,
Gotcha, gotcha. Anyway, I was just curious about that.
yeah.
That's so cool to hear about that because yeah, I've been hearing that opening all my
Yep.
life, and I thought, wow, I wonder how
Mm.
they feel, you know?
Well, and that, like, just Gord doing that,
Yeah,
led so many people to check us out,
I'm
right?
sure.
So, yeah, it really
Exactly.
helped. Really
No,
helped.
that's great. And it's a
Yeah.
little bit like you're saying of paying it forward down to a
Yeah,
band
exactly.
coming up after you. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. That's all very positive, and I'm going to make this more negative now. What is a worst gig memory that you have, or the worst?
Yeah. The worst is kind of like, it was profoundly bad.
Oh.
So it's not entirely bad, I guess, but we we played the Pacific Coliseum, the hockey rink in Vancouver, opening for the
hmm
Bare Naked Ladies, I think in 1991.
Okay.
And we'd conceived this whole complicated intro where it would start with this loop. Martin's guitar effects would start with this loop, and then we would build the band one by one. We'd all go up on stage and play. And so we started Martin's pedals, and there was this cool loop. It's the beginning of the When Winter Comes, which is
hmm
the last song on Melville. Anyways, it was really cool, and it sounded great coming out of the PA, and we'd never heard ourselves on, on a sound system that big before. So it was great,
Right.
feeling great. Fucking Dave Clark, our drummer, is supposed to go next, and he's going to start to play the groove to the loop. And as he's going up on stage, he like kicked one of Martin's pedals or got like lost in the wiring, the cabling, and then basically like unplugged his
Oh.
stuff. And then so there was silence. And then yeah, and then it was the scramble in the darkness of the stage to kind of figure out, because he's got this real complicated chain of his effects.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we're up
God.
there. Oh my God. And it was like 5 minutes where it was shut down. Nobody knew it was happening. The crowd is looking at us
There's
like
no vamping, like not one of you didn't get on the mic and,
we
look over here as all the
no,
rest of you. No?
you'd figure we just weren't, we were so green,
Sure.
and we'd never played a venue of that size.
Yeah, it makes
If it was
sense.
a
You're deer in the headlights and that kind of.
totally.
Yes.
So the rest of the gig went as badly as the beginning did. Like we just never. And I remember going like backstage after the show, and people were so distraught. And
Like the rest of
but
the band, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
like heartbroken,
Yeah.
right? And nobody's fault. We just all felt really
Sure.
terrible
Yeah.
for ourselves and for each other. But I remember Jay Scott, who was a Vancouver promoter, who was a friend of ours, came back afterwards, after a few minutes of us being in the dressing room alone, and was kind of laughing. He was like, you guys. And it kind of made me think, oh, okay,
Yeah.
nobody's life is over.
Right,
Like
exactly.
nobody got hurt, right?
It'll be
Except kind of
funny to you in a little while. It's already funny to a friend. It'll be
exactly,
fine.
exactly. And
Yeah.
then so, you know, um, I realized at that moment as well that it would never get that bad. Like that was the fucking nadir. That was the bottom.
Wow.
And once you found that, then okay, everything
Exactly.
can kind of be pointed upwards. And I remember getting the acoustic guitar out uh, after after a moment, and just started to play it. And then, literally within like 20 minutes, we were just like singing and playing and having a great
Sure.
time.
So you never addressed it though. Not even right before you started the song or whatever.
No, we
Okay.
just started to
I respect that.
do what a band should do when you're away together, is just to kind of have fun. And so we
Yes.
found a way to have fun ultimately, and we were able to totally, make fun of Dave for doing what he did with the pedals and blah 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 blah. And why do you have so many goddamn pedals, anyways? Like all that kind of stuff. And ended up a nice
Exactly.
day. Yeah.
Good. Well, out of curiosity, what was that green room like in the Pacific
Oh, it was a
Coliseum?
hockey rink. It was a hockey dressing room. So
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
okay, gotcha.
yeah.
That's very Canadian though. I like the
That's
image of
true.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
okay, then moving forward to the song section, what do you think is Rheostatics' best song? And I know that's a tough question. Usually people give one or two. You can give a few.
I mean, I think what ultimately kind of became our best song was the song that we started every show with.
Hmm.
For the last like 5 years, we started every show with the same song, and that was Stolen Car.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a song that Martin sings that I wrote, that I actually wrote it on my wedding night, November 26th, 1992. I know
Wow.
that date because I got married on November 27th, 1992. But yeah, we that night on the 26th, 92, we'd actually sang the anthem at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I was getting married the next day. If you see photos of us singing the anthem that night, we're all in our tuxedos, because
Hmm.
that's what the band was, my wedding party, and we all had tuxedos for the wedding, so we wore tuxes to
That's
sing
awesome.
"Oh Canada." Anyway, so I came home that night and just sort of started writing this song. That was 1992. The song didn't appear on an album until 2013. So that song took like fucking 12 years to finish. And
Wow.
once we started to play it, it also just like, it just encompasses so many elements of who we are. Like everybody sings on it. Um, Everybody has a really distinct part. There's a long enough part in it for it to be really jammy, and for it
Hmm.
to go to places it doesn't normally go. Every time we did it, it was a little bit different. Um, so I think that ended up like just casting a huge like ray of light over our repertoire, and
Sure.
just encompassed all of the kind of the strongest elements of what we do.
Well, that's a really good answer. That's really good reasoning for why it's your choice right now for best song. But it begs the question why you would choose it as your opener on shows. Like,
I know, never start with a showstopper, right?
I guess is what I'm thinking. Yeah, exactly. So it's funny that what do you it begs the question, how do you set up your set list? How do
It's
you
in,
balance it?
yeah, no, that's really interesting because in the past, and before we started to do this, we would start with three kind of, more, just shorter
Yeah,
songs,
yeah.
uh, all three
Kick it
singers.
off, get the energy going,
Yeah,
whatever.
totally.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, I just think maybe because we were a bit older, frankly, it was like,
Hmm.
and a more established audience, we didn't have to
Yeah.
go out there and blow everybody's heads off, and
Right,
play every
right.
show like we were winning,
Yes, that
new fans.
specifically. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of those versions of Stolen Car that started the sets were like, Jesus, like 12 to 14 minutes long. It really went, if we were feeling it, we would just kind of keep going. And that's also a really nice way of working yourself into the night too, right? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, uh just you know, get your palm in the or your fist in the catcher's mitt, right? And just kind of feel the heat in
Yeah.
that pocket, and just everybody just feels like it's all, it's already well worn before you're into your second song. So it's good.
You made me think of something I had never really considered, which is that obviously I was thinking about how to set up a set list, but you made a good point, which is there's a section of your career as a band where you do need to essentially set it
Right.
up so that you're winning people over.
Yeah.
And then if you're lucky enough, slash hardworking enough, slash whatever, you become successful enough that actually you can begin building the set list to satisfy people you know are already fans of the band.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
is there some sort of sweets? Obviously, you
For
are
sure.
getting new fans that come to shows still, even though you're successful. So, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, because there's also a real kind of charm in blithely not caring what people think about what you're
Certainly,
playing, right?
certainly.
And we used to do these things in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s at the Rivoli in
Hmm.
Toronto,
Hmm.
where they were called, what were they called? They were live rehearsals basically. So we would
Okay,
invite people to come down. It would be like $5 to the door, and you could sit and you could basically like watch us rehearse on stage. And
that's
that
awesome.
meant
They should still do
it
that.
was fucking cool. Like
Yeah.
people would come and somebody would bring in a new song, and they would kind of, you would see how the sausage was made.
No, I love.
And
Oh man.
so that kind of like just established us internally as, oh, we can do anything.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that I think that kind of played in a little bit to how it presented live, to not really yeah, getting away from that kind of classic, structure in terms of how a traditional set list is supposed to go. There were times also where it was just fun to do a traditional set list also,
Sure,
right?
of course, of course.
But yeah,
No, it needs to be interesting after a certain point, it needs to be more interesting for the band what they're playing than it does for the audience, I
that's
almost
right.
think.
For
Like,
sure, for sure.
I don't understand how bands do the same set list in the same order every night. Like, I would go nuts. Uh,
Well,
uh,
there are also so many performers that not only that, but like the same patter too, right? The same
that's true, the same
songs.
bits.
Holy
Yeah,
fuck. Yeah, that's
that's uh,
oof. That's
power to them. I don't know, but I could never do it.
I mean, yeah, I think it depends on the person too. Like if you're not comfortable just kind of riffing, then okay, I guess that sort of makes sense. But
Yeah.
I could yeah, you want to go to see a show where you feel like you're seeing something happen for the first time, or
Exactly.
yeah,
Otherwise, listen to the album
that's
is
right.
kind of how I
For
feel
sure.
about it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're at the last titular question here. What do you think is Rheostatics' worst song?
I mean, there are some pretty challenging songs. that we would have done in the early days, I think.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I think we were pretty good in terms of choosing our stuff on that we committed to like an album. Um, but yeah, like those early recordings, um like
Are they listenable, what you're about to reference?
I mean, to me they are, I
Well,
guess.
okay. Forgive me, but I am looking for an answer that somebody could like look up on YouTube or
Oh, I see.
Spotify. Yes.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
understand being proud of all of your work, but there must be a least best or one you never pay attention to or one you
Okay.
a forgotten child, you know?
Interesting. Right. Okay. Let me, yeah, sorry. I was sort of a little bit kind of unprepared
No,
in
no,
that sense.
it's okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I should have been more explicit, but
No,
it's
no, that's okay. That's okay. Um, yeah, geez. Now I'm trying to kind of go into my brain and sort of figure out, I mean, there's no way I'm gonna name like somebody else's song, by the
no,
way.
of course. This is
So
not a, I don't want this podcast is never meant to be an opportunity to bash anybody, you know. It's meant to just be self-effacing and talk about your work.
yeah, I mean, I wrote a song called "From Here to There to You," which
Hmm.
is on Night of the Shooting Stars, which we never played, and which
Okay.
I will never play. And
Okay,
I
sounds like a
think,
good candidate then.
yeah,
So
yeah, and
why?
I think for sure it's the weakest thing I've ever done, and I
Okay.
think that's because I think one of the reasons that is like I used to be super like I was at one point very prolific as a writer,
Hmm.
but that was new family times. Like that was right when our kids were coming along,
Uh-huh.
and I think my output at that time probably suffered from that
Sure.
because I was fucking just busy with, other
You've got the
human.
best reasons in the world to
There you
for that
go.
to slack, you know?
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a song we never played live, and is completely forgettable.
And you think that it became that way because you didn't have enough time to devote to it because of parental duties. Again, makes a lot of sense. But if you had had more time, it's the kind of thing that maybe could have been a better song. Is that kind of
Well,
what you're alluding to?
there's nothing original about it either,
Oh,
and like there's no new idea there.
uh-huh.
I think that's partly it. I and that album, Night of the Shooting Stars. Geez, what do I have? Like, I think I only have like two songs on that record. Mm. Yeah, I don't have a lot. So there wasn't a lot to choose from, and what was there wasn't really great. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I mean, I think as a songwriter too, it's like I think it was David Crosby from Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young who said like, alternate tunings can really help you when you're stuck with writer's block because the chords present differently,
Totally.
and
I could see that.
Dave Clark. I remember reading. He read somewhere that said, where somebody said, just play a chord you've never played before. And so I would always kind of try to go that way, like try to, try to, again, like just do something in a song that I'd never done before. And usually pretty successful, but that's an example of like nothing is new there. And that was like, well, I guess I got to come up with some material. This will
No,
work.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like what you're describing as essentially the barometer for what is a song that you're proud of versus one that is just uninspired in a way, you know, like you said, there's nothing new on it. There's nothing pulling you even as the writer forward, it sounds like,
Right.
right, playing it or writing
Yeah.
it. So no, that makes a lot of sense. It's the thing that like stirs you the least. There's a reason you didn't play it live. Uh, did anybody ever, not that I expect band members to be mean or like chirp each other, but all I'm wondering is, was there a discussion that was had about not playing it, or was it just never picked up to play or recommended?
Yeah. No, there wasn't really a discussion. Um, that was
Okay.
also like our drummer Don was leaving. I don't remember that being a particularly happy time, honestly,
Ah,
for
okay,
the
fair enough.
band.
Yeah.
And we broke up soon after that. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, it wasn't, we probably weren't being very honest with each other at that point, or, communication, we were starting to drift apart a little bit. So that could have been the product of that, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you for answering all my four questions. I wanna leave it on a slightly happier note than
Yeah.
that. So therefore, I will ask not about how it ended, but how it came back together. Like, how did you
Sure.
become
And I
active
also
again?
should, before I talk about that, I should say that, like, like the sad times and the
Hmm.
difficult times and the bad times, that's also just part of it. Like, that is
Yeah.
like, if people are kidding themselves when they think that, or when they assume that there isn't like a deep, deep darkness and, pathos in
Yeah.
one's kind of creative career. It's hard. It's often kind of hard to see, but it's there and it exists, and you just have to, something that you can't be surprised by going into it, because it's going to happen inevitably to everybody. But yeah, I'm trying to think. So we did a bunch of shows 2 years ago at the Horseshoe. We
Hmm.
did where we used to play all the time. So we went back there and we did three shows. They were largely nostalgic. Like, we played Melville in its entirety and whale
Hmm.
music in its entirety. And while the shows kind of came off, and were really successful. It was great. People came out and loved it.
I remember hearing about them.
Yeah, we kind of ended up with a bit of a queasy feeling in our stomach, frankly, where it's like, why are we doing what we do? Is it to trade on, past glory, or is it to kind of figure out a way to move forward? So, we thought, this was a chance for us to really kind of almost throw everything out,
Hmm.
and that's what we've done basically. I got the idea literally before falling asleep about the Great Lakes Suite,
Hmm.
which was kind of going to. And when we did music inspired by the Group of Seven, it was largely instrumental. I think there's three vocal pieces on that work, but it's mostly instrumental, and it's a beloved record by people who like the band. And so I thought it would be really great to kind of do something non-linear and non-verbal, something that is also like improvisationally based.
Hmm.
So we set some recording. We actually set rehearsal time up. Had a rehearsal, and then it went so well we thought we should just go and rehearse, but have it in the studio. But the idea was to go into the studio and into the space without any preconceived notions about what we were going to do. I called Alex Lifeson. He was the first guy I called, and because he'd sat in with us a bunch of times.
Hmm.
In fact, just while I'm talking, there's a great
Yeah.
moment where Alex came to rehearse with us, and he pulled out this Gibson, uh, uh, this Gibson 335. Maybe I'm getting the
Hmm.
wrong model, but it was a beautiful guitar. And we were about to do our version of Record of the Evan Fitzgerald, and I asked Alex what if there was a story behind the guitar, and it was the guitar that Robbie Robertson played on the first band album. So
Holy.
there we were in this rehearsal space on College Street, playing a Gordon Lightfoot song with Alex Lifeson playing Robbie Robertson's guitar. It was amazing.
Wow.
So
That is
yeah,
unreal.
it was
Yeah.
unreal. It was
That
so great. It was so
that's
great.
so cool. And so I guess over time, Lifeson just became a fan of the band. Well,
Yeah, well,
right?
I mean, Neil Peart, Rush's drummer,
Oh,
was
yeah.
on Whale Music, and then I got to know Geddy through baseball and our love of literature and stuff, and then Alex became friends with. So I knew that. I think it was I was talking to Geddy and asking what everybody was up to. And I knew that we had good times with Alex, but again, we'd always mostly kind of done covers before. We'd
Hmm.
never really written together. So I just sent him a note like, thinking of doing this. It's going to be improvisational, largely instrumental, blah, 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 blah. And he immediately sent me a note back saying, like, this sounds really exciting. So I called the guys and I said, Alex is into it, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so here we are now, I guess, a handful of months after starting this project. And
Hmm.
we yeah, we have over like 30 hours of recorded material. Tanya Tagaq has performed on it.
Wow,
Um,
cool.
yeah, we have Chief Stacy LaForme has done a poem. The great poet Liz Howard is on it. Gord Downey's on it. We have we've reached out to other incredible indigenous writers to their words will probably be the only words you hear on this work. The rest of it will be us just kind of creating underneath it and stuff too. So anyways, it's grown into this amazing thing, and now we just got to figure out how to piece it together, and then hopefully shows this summer or fall where we all perform it, and then and the record comes out.
Well, and what does we all mean when you say perform? Because I was
Yeah.
thinking, wow, what a collection of great creatives, right? But what's the likelihood you all get together for a tour and tour it together?
The kind of the short term idea for touring is to do the show in all of the Great Lakes cities.
Uh-huh.
That's the
Wow,
idea.
cool.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
makes
that's what
sense.
that's what we're trying to figure out. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, fantastic. I thought this was
yeah.
like, actually, you know what? I want to ask you one more thing and then we can end it. Sorry if I'm keeping you, but
That's
you
fine.
referenced baseball with Geddy Lee. Growing up, I always loved seeing Geddy Lee in the stands,
Yeah.
like doing his own scorekeeping or whatever that is. So does that mean you're also a massive Jays fan and you guys, that's what you talk about or what?
Yeah, pretty much. We
Okay.
don't really even talk about music that much when we're well, I wrote a book called Baseballissimo, which was my third book about following an Italian baseball team
hmm
around Italy. And Getty years ago optioned it for the screen, and
hmm
Jay Baruchel, the actor, wrote the screenplay. And we've gone through a couple of directors and a couple of producers, but we actually, yeah, we have.
Still haven't found quite the thing.
Nope. But it's still we have a great script and a great team, and hopefully it will get made sometime over the next 18 months. We're still out there. So Getty and I have been friends for years, but the reason we came together is he loved that book,
hmm
and I think he also knew that I was okay, or we were okay, because Neil, his lifelong friend and bandmate, also like what we were doing, and Neil had read my books and stuff too. So
Right.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like indirectly vouching for you by hanging out with you, and therefore, so Getty will feel more comfortable. It makes sense.
yeah, and they're all fucking great, 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 great guys. It's they come as advertised, everything you've heard about them, and anyways, I
Well, I
feel
was going to
really.
bring them up when you were telling that story about the Brazilian woman you later got the hash with, and how you guys aren't that kind of band. Normally, you just go back, play some cards,
Yeah,
whatever. And I remember watching the Rush documentary that
yeah,
came out, what, maybe 10 years ago now.
yeah,
And at one point, they say they were on tour with, I think, Kiss. Kiss was all about having, women backstage and
right.
hooking up with them. And it said that the Kiss members went to go find the Rush members to be like, "You want to party? Like, what's going on?" And they were all just reading in their rooms, which
Well,
is
yeah, and like
hilarious.
their marriages have all sustained, right? Like married to the same
Well,
woman.
what a surprise,
Yeah, it's pretty great.
That's
Doing it the
awesome.
right way for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for talking to me, Dave. This is like a really good chat. And the way we normally end it is you just reintroduce yourself, reintroduce the band, and say your worst song choice name.
It's Dave Bidini from the Rheostatics. My worst song is Here to There to You from Night of the Shooting Stars. It's a real stinker.
A hand to see, an eye to touch, to miss the one I'll miss her from. An airport's terminal repent. In warm beer left an empty tent. When miles from you, the days they inch, they hold me in their tight and clinch. The world steps from here to there to you. A face that dreams, a heart that thrums. The voice is weak, but the voice is young, as sweet as the sugar from a tree. An elbow, finger, or a knee. Now that there's nothing left to prove, you take a single step from here to there to you. And wets your face that pulls me to